All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Turn the Tassel Show. My name is Stephen Ampersand. I'm your host, and as always, I'm here to help you and the people you love get to and through college, university, or the trade schools earlier on time with minimum to no debt. We are in the end game, people. We are in the end game. It's getting bad out there. It's getting bad out there. If you're like me, you're a fan of the Marvel universe, and you saw it begin probably more than a decade ago with Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr., and he did his thing in Iron Man 1, 2, and 3. And in between there, they sprinkled in Thor. They sprinkled in Guardians of the Galaxy. They sprinkled in several other, Captain Marvel and several other movies as they were making their way towards the final showdown against none other than Thanos and the Infinity War. So you remember that movie, the Infinity War, they get all the way to the end, and they're trying their best to keep these Infinity Stones away from Thanos. But he gets them anyway because, as he says, it's inevitable. Let's try that again. It's inevitable. There we go. Right? So he gets all the stones. He gets the last stone. Well, the second to the last stone is the stone he gets from Doctor Strange. It's in Doctor Strange's iris, the time stone, where he can manipulate time, right? And so he needs that stone to complete the set to be able to do the snap to achieve his aim, which was to reduce the universe's population by 50%, cut everything in half, right? That was his plan. So I'm going to quickly show, with fair use, I'm going to show the scene where Doctor Strange decides to go ahead and give up the stone. And we'll take a look at that. So let's go ahead without further ado, cut to camera number 2. We struggle streaming already. Let's see if this will play. Let's try it on the smaller scale. See what happens. So far, not a mooch. What's going on here?
Why would you do that? We're in the end game now.
There it is. Oh, snap. No pun intended. See what I did there? No snap. Oh, snap. Man, I'm coming with it tonight, y'all. I hope you're ready because I certainly am. Right? But what was the point of that? The whole point of that was that, we're in the end game now. We're in the end game. Doctor Strange, with fair use, Doctor Strange understood that because he had done the meditation thing and his head was moving and everything, and he was looking at all of the millions of permutations of how that event could have played out. There was one scenario that they all prevailed. There was only one scenario, right? And he determined that after they lost in that situation, there was only one other scenario in which they could prevail. And he knew ultimately, spoiler alert if you haven't seen it, they knew ultimately that the only way that Thanos was going to be able to be defeated was finally in the end, Tony Stark was going to have to cleverly get the stones away from him with the mechanized hand that he created. And then Tony himself, spoiler alert, is going to have to do the snap to imagine Thanos gone and all his minions, knowing that it was going to kill him. He knew his body couldn't tolerate that it would kill him. And so Doctor Strange saw that event and saw Tony Stark. That was the one scenario which they won. Tony Stark was going to have to sacrifice himself in order to bring back the 50% of people. Well, they were already brought back, but in order to keep them back, and not just them, but Thanos said, because you did this, I'm going to get rid of everybody so nobody will know. So he basically saved all of the universe in that one snap, but he was going to have to sacrifice himself to do it. And it was a full circle moment for Tony Stark because earlier in the Avengers franchise, Captain America, all those movies, Captain America, and they got into it and they fought and everything. In the Age of Ultron, they fought and they were squabbling, whatever. And Captain America basically rebuked Tony and was like, you're not that guy. You're not that guy that's going to lay down on the wire when it matters. And Tony's like, no, I'm not. I'm not the guy that's going to lay down the wire. I'm going to cut the wire. In other words, Tony Stark and his character was such that he felt that there was no situation that he couldn't think his way out of. And Captain America was essentially saying in that moment, sometimes there isn't a way out. Sometimes the way out is to sacrifice. And you're not that guy. You're not willing to do it. Well, what we see is Tony Stark's for the series was not that guy. He became that guy after he had a child. He had his daughter. He loved her 3,000. Remember that? He realized that there was something on the planet that was more important than himself. And so ultimately he was willing to sacrifice himself, not really for the universe. He was willing to sacrifice himself for his daughter. Okay? What in the world does all this have to do with the student loan crisis going on? I'm glad you asked. Okay? Stephen Strange told Tony Stark, when asked, why did you do that? He told him, we're in the end game now. So allow me, Stephen Ampersand, you're asking, what are you talking about? And let me respond and say, we're in the end game now. We've seen every scenario of the student loan debt crisis unfold. And based on where we are in society globally, we're watching a full-scale war being waged in Ukraine on the part of Russia. And we are very close, if not already, on the verge of a third world war. World War III is a possibility. It's a likelihood. And supply chains are in a complete disaster, debacle. There isn't enough baby formula. And they told us in advance there's not going to be enough baby formula over the summer. They've also talked about how there's going to be nationwide brownouts over the summer because we can no longer produce enough energy to supply the energy demands of our society over the summer. We've seen record inflation all over the world, but certainly here. And gas prices are through the roof and on and on and on. This is the perfect storm in every area of life, but absolutely in terms of higher education and college, and particularly for those families that are strapped with higher gas prices, inflated rents, the inability to buy homes, right? Not to be doom and gloom, but folks are locked into rental situations. They can't buy homes because they can't compete with wealthy individuals, both domestic and foreign, who have cash on the barrel to drop on these properties. Your little 20% down in, pre-screened mortgage isn't doing a thing against that. So now you're locked into rentals. And remember, the rental market took a major hit during the pandemic because they could not require people to pay and they could not put people out during the pandemic. So those landlords are hurting for rents. And so they're trying to recoup their losses. They're increasing the rents. What are you going to do? Families are being squeezed. And many of the mothers in particular, but also some fathers, are still carrying student loan debt well after the 10-year repayment period that was initially signed up for. And in the African American community, particularly African American women, some are carrying more, 100% or more of the balance that they borrowed 20 years later. Now they've frozen the repayment requirement right now, and they've frozen the interest rate right now through August because nobody's got the money. The bubble is popping. It's popping. So we are in the end game now. There is one surefire way for you as an individual, whether the government acts or not. There's one surefire way to get rid of your student loans permanently. But it is not going to be easy. It will cause collateral damage to your financial record, etc. But it will get you out of the student loan nightmare and give you the opportunity to start over again. And I'm going to tell you about that tonight in our live broadcast here. I'm going to pull up another screen if I can. Come back to it here. And I'm going to cut to camera 2 here in a second, but I'm going to pull up another tab here because I think this will start to paint a picture for what you can do. See, the problem with the student loan situation is that they are direct loans. They're guaranteed loans from the federal government. Part of what made them able to convince banks and others to participate before they went direct even was, we're going to guarantee these loans. And taxpayers, since we're now shifting this from private banks to you, we're going to make sure that it's a good investment because we're going to require people to pay it back no matter what. That's what the guarantee is. These people have no collateral. They have no marketable skills yet because they've not gone to college yet. We don't have any guarantees that they're going to graduate, and we see that graduation rates are horrible, right? So we know a lot of people aren't going to graduate, blah, blah, blah. So because that would otherwise be an absolute horrible investment, we're going to guarantee first the private banks and then later the taxpayer. We're going to guarantee a return on your investment because we're going to make sure that no matter what, these people are going to have to pay it back. That's how they were able to get it passed, right? So what does that mean? Practically, it means you cannot bankrupt your way out of it. You can't charge it off. You can't bankrupt your way out of it. This is a debt that will follow you until you pay it off, become disabled, or die. Those are the 3 remedies to the student loan debt situation. Or let's asterisk and do 3A and say, or if they forgive it, which they're not going to do. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. And if I'm wrong, I will happily get on here and celebrate. I'll be partying with you because guess what? I still have student loans. And I started college in 1996. And that is the reality for most people in Generation X. So just know, if I'm wrong about that and they forgive it all, yay! I'm going to be fired up. I'll never be so happy to be wrong. But as I've mentioned to you before, if that does happen, remember what will occur. They'll be dancing in the streets until January 29th, let's say 2023, when everybody gets their W-2 forms in the mail from their job showing what they paid in taxes, and you get your other tax forms, your mortgage, if you're still in a home, you get your interest payments forms to come in so you can file your taxes. And also, you will receive a 1099-G for the student loan balance that was forgiven for you. And guess what? You didn't pay any taxes on that. Oh, snap. And guess what else? You're required to. And guess what else? You ain't got it. And guess what else? The IRS don't care. And guess what else? You're going to owe that. Only the IRS, unlike the Department of Education, has the full authority to ultimately criminalize you and throw you in jail for not paying your taxes. And they will do it. You see, even a forgiveness of the student loan program doesn't solve the problem. It creates another one, and it's going to be worse. Which is why I'm telling you they're not going to do it, because they cannot justify criminalizing $1.73 plus trillion worth of student loan debt obligatees and criminalizing them and ultimately sending some of them to jail, but not others. And then you get into, well, why did you send these people to jail, but not these people? This is divisive. This is bigotry. This is, I mean, you know what's going to happen. So they can't do that. And even if they do, it's still because you didn't resolve the debt, you just shifted it. And you shifted it from an agency that, yes, can garnish your paychecks, and yes, can put liens on your house, and yes, can take your car, and yes, can seize other personal property and liquidate it to try to pay off your balance, all that. But in the end, they can't throw you in jail. The IRS can do all the things I just mentioned, and they can put you in jail. And so how do you get out? How do you get out? I'm going to cut the camera too and show you. And see, people won't talk about this because they don't want you to know that this is possible. All right, so here's where I'm at. We're looking at, and this is just one place. This is credible. Refinance student loans, pay less on student loans, get more out of life. Okay, so this is step one of the end game. Come back to you. Step one of the end game here. We're in the end game now. Okay, this is going to be a process. It's going to take you minimum 7 years and ultimately 10 to get through it. But when you're done, you'll be done. There will be sacrifice. You're gonna have some Tony Stark sacrifice in your life. This is not going to come without cost to you, personal cost. But it can be done. And I'm here to show you because this is really the only way. Let me get back to it. How do you deal with the student loan debt crisis? First step one, you refinance your federal direct student loans out of the federal government. In other words, you cut them the check. Give them the check. You work with a variety of different lenders, right? There are so many of them out there. You got Advantage Education Loans, you got Brazos, you got Citizens, College Ave, Common Board, EduVest. I mean, look, you got all these things. You got SoFi, although they don't have it listed here, right? But you got all these different lenders and their rates, okay? And just by doing that, just by refinancing your student loan debt, doesn't matter how much it is, getting it out of the government and into a private bank, now you're in business. Now, to do that, you're going to have, well, at least, marginal credit. And chances are you're going to have a higher interest rate. You might even become, you need to look at my face for this. You might even have a higher interest rate on your refinanced student loans with a private bank, higher than you have with the Federal Department of Education. I told you there would be some sacrifice here, because if your credit isn't what it needs to be, and let's face it, for a lot of us, it's not because of everything that's squeezing us, right? Perfect storm. So no shame. But because it's the case, you're probably going to have a higher interest rate, but that is okay. Why? Because then you're going to do your best to make payments for at least a year, but you're going to do your best to make those payments. And then ultimately, step 2, you're going to file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I'm dropping dime tonight. Okay? Facts and truth. You're getting it tonight. Step 1 is refinance it out of the government. Step 2 is make payments for at least a year. Step 3 is file for bankruptcy, Chapter 7. Okay? Let me show you why. And put it this way. Chapter 7, bankruptcy. Booyah. Okay. Let's look at what Chapter 7 bankruptcy is. Experian will tell us. Let's cut to camera 2. And this is going to be a little bit longer broadcast tonight, but this is important because we're giving you the steps to get out of student loan debt without waiting for the government to do it for you. Okay, so what is a Chapter 7 bankruptcy? Chapter 7 bankruptcy, also known as a straight or liquidation bankruptcy, is a type of bankruptcy that can clear away many types of unsecured debts. If you're far behind on your bills and don't have the means to afford monthly payments and living expenses, filing Chapter 7 bankruptcy could be a last resort to help you reset your finances. However, you may have to give up some of your possessions, and it will have a long-lasting negative impact on your credit worthiness. They ain't lying. They ain't lying about that. Okay. It's going a bankruptcy, a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Maybe they call it Chapter 7 because it's going to be on your credit report for 7 years. Really 10 years. It's 10 years before you can have it taken off of your credit report. But after about 7 years, the nuclear atom bomb that it drops on your credit will, the half-lives of the radiation will dissipate, and you'll be able to do some credit-worthy things again after about 7 years. But it's going to get you for 7 years, for sure. It's going to get you. But you'll be out of debt. See, you can't charge off student loans. Let me come back. You can't charge off the student loans that are direct lended from the government. They won't let you. You could file for bankruptcy and take that atom bomb hit and everything else, and those student loans will still be sitting there waiting for you. They are the cockroaches of nuclear bombs. They will survive. They'll be the only thing left. Everything else will be burnt and scorched. Right? Everything else will be burnt and scorched, but them loans are going to be sitting there like, remember me? Student loans are the corn nuggets that you ingest with your other food. Everything else comes out and looks nothing like it did when it went in. Corn comes out looking exactly the same, and it went through the same digestive system that the rest of your food did. Yeah, we went there. Yeah, student loans is the corn is the corn that comes out the same. Okay. All right. So they'll be sitting there waiting for you. But if you do this, if you step 1, refinance your loans out of the federal government, and then you put those into a private bank, then you do your best to keep up with those payments, but you fall behind in them and you can't keep up because you can't do that and you can't pay your bills and you can't provide for your kids and blah, 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 blah. You do all of that. Now you file for bankruptcy, Chapter 7. And that will cost you as well because you're going to need a lawyer. It depends on where you go. I've seen some places advertising you get it done for $150. I find that questionable, but you can get a bankruptcy done legitimately, I think, for about $350. Okay. And yes, you're paying somebody $350 or more or less to drop an atom bomb on your financial reputation. And if you do that, I'm going to give you another added piece of advice. If you're going to do that, then you don't just do it for your refinance student loans. If you're going to file bankruptcy, you put everything in there. And with a Chapter 7, if you still want to keep your car or whatnot, then you can agree to keep that out of it, but you better be able to make those payments or they'll come repo your car. But again, if that happens, your credit's already destroyed, so who cares? But the point is, you can negotiate to keep certain things you want to keep, your vehicle, whatnot, as that's what your lawyer's there for. That can happen. But in a very real way, if you're trying to get out from the debt, honestly, you just put it all in there. You put all your consumer debt in there. You put your credit card debt in there. You put your refinance student loan debt in there. You put your car payment in there. And yes, that means you're going to give up the car unless you decide to keep the car. But again, if you can't afford it, then should you? And now that we've got remote work options and everything else, you don't necessarily need the vehicle. I mean, you can take a Lyft or an Uber, if it really came push to shove. So you could do without that vehicle. I'm just saying. But you're still holding that L. You're taking the L for sure. Okay. But you will be debt free. Imagine that. And for the younger people under the sound of my voice, I know 10 years sounds like a lifetime. But people of my generation, Gen X, I'll even say millennials now because millennials are turning 40 this year. Wowzers. But people and I'll even say some baby boomers who are still around because, yes, some of them still have student loans. I mean, dag. Okay. So for the boomers, the Gen Xers, and now even the millennials who have this student loan debt, right? Those are three generations that are most impacted by this $1.73 trillion, right? For us, 10 years is a blink. It really is. I mean, I'm of a certain age now where I almost remember what I had for breakfast 10 years ago today. Real talk. I know you're laughing, but it's true. It's true. All right. So we're in the end game now. And when you're in the end game, you have to think long term. This here is a marathon. It is not a sprint. You're not going to get out of this easily. And you're not going to get out of this unscathed. You're going to have to throw some things on that wire, just like Captain America said. You're going to have to do it. You're going to have to stark up. And you're going to have to, and I am debt free. But you got to do it. Okay. So step 1, refinance your student loans out of the federal direct student loan program. Step 2, struggle with paying the payments with your privately owned bank. Step 3, file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy. Let me cut back and read on so you can see more. Okay. When you file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy, the court places an automatic temporary stay on your current debts. This stops creditors from collecting payments, garnishing your wages, foreclosing on your home, repossessing property, evicting you, or turning off your utilities. The court will take legal possession of your property and appoint a bankruptcy trustee to your case. The trustee's job is to review your finances and assets and oversee your Chapter 7 bankruptcy. They will sell certain property to the property the bankruptcy won't let you keep, non-exempt property, and use the proceeds to repay your creditors. The trustee will also arrange and run a meeting between you and the creditors called a creditor meeting, where you'll go to a courthouse and answer questions about your filing. The list of property you don't have to sell or turn over to the creditors, exempt property, and the total value that you can exempt. This varies by state. Some states let you choose between their exemption list and the federal exemptions, but most Chapter 7 bankruptcy cases are no asset cases, meaning all of the personal property is either exempt or there is a valid lien against the property. At the end of the process, approximately 4 to 6 months from your initial filing, the court will discharge your remaining debts, meaning you don't need to pay them anymore. You don't need to pay them anymore. However, some types of debts generally aren't dischargeable through bankruptcy, including child support, alimony, court fees, some tax debts, and most student loans. But Stephen, you said that this process is going to get rid of your student loans. Yes, because remember, they're not. The key word there is most student loans. In other words, the government ones. You can't discharge those, not unless you are permanently disabled or dead. But if you take it out of the government's hands, in other words, you pay them by refinancing it, they cut a check to the government for you and let you pay them back, the private bank. Well, those are now going to be considered dischargeable. You can discharge that because now it's a private debt. And if specifically, if there is a caveat, if these companies have had to agree, and I haven't gone in to look and see, but they may have tried to curtail that by telling these refinancers that these are still guaranteed, so they can't do, they can't charge you off either because they're assuming all the risk in that case, right? Well, then okay, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go ahead and get a personal loan to do it. Personal loan, you could take out a second mortgage to do it. Whatever asset you may have that you could draw out of. And see, right now, if you have a home in this market, the way the house prices have gone, this is the perfect time for anybody that is a homeowner to go ahead and draw equity out of their home. Why? Because the market has gone up so high because there's high demand for homes and low inventory because the market is so tight. Your home has increased in value. If you put your home on the market today, it's gone up exponentially. Just go look at Zillow or in one of those sites and you'll see how much your home has appreciated in value over the past year because of the circumstances. Now's the time. Draw that money out of the house and pay off those loans. Do it. Because, well, what if we lose the house? Well, in bankruptcy, you could lose the house. You could. Or if you've got all your other debts wiped out, you may be able to afford your mortgage now because all the other debts were wiped out in the bankruptcy. That's a win. And if you don't own the house outright, meaning if you're still paying on a mortgage on the house, they can't take it out from under you because you don't own it. You see that? You see that, right? You don't own the house. The bank still owns it. So they can't force the bank to sell the house that you haven't paid them for yet. And the banks have no interest in putting you out, and they certainly have no. Well, I'll check that. They might have interest in putting you out if they could go and then sell the house for the exorbitant prices that they can get for it. That's why you would do That's why you would do the refinance, that's why you would get the home equity loan before you would even pull the trigger on the bankruptcy, because now once that's happened, they're going to take a major hit if they put you out and sell it to somebody else. So again, that's also a hedge. It protects you, right? So they're going to then be incentivized to work with you to stay in the house so that you can keep honoring that mortgage, so that at the very least they can recoup the money that they've put out there. Because again, if you've gotten the refinance done and or done the home equity piece, the HELOC on top of your first mortgage, they're going to be so invested in you paying it back that even if they said, no, we want you out, and then they try to resell it, they would still lose money because they probably can't sell it for more than what you owe. I'm breaking it down tonight, people. Okay. So all that to say, it's important to know this and to do it in the right order. Okay. So let me just go back. I know this is a longer broadcast, but this is important because I'm trying to help people to do their own student loan bailout. I'm trying to help you to recognize that we're in the end game now. There's one shot. We're in the end game now. And it will require some sacrifice. But it will be worth it, because in the end, you will be debt free. And 10 years later, it won't even be on your credit report. And you'll be out of student loan debt. And as long as you never, ever, 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 ever go back and do it again, as long as you've learned that lesson, then you're going to be okay. Okay? Let me finish up here. All right. Now they're going to talk about chapter 13. Okay, so let's see who qualifies. There are a few requirements you'll need to meet to file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. You generally must complete an individual or group credit counseling course from an approved credit counseling agency within 180 days before filing. Either the average of your monthly income during the previous 6 months must be less than the median income for the same household size in your state, or you must pass a means test, which determines if your disposable income is high enough to make partial payments to unsecured creditors. If you don't pass the means test, you may still be able to file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. You can't, Chapter 13, just quickly, Chapter 13 is basically, it's a bankruptcy that says you're still going to pay people, but they're going to negotiate down, how much you have to pay them based on how much you can pay them. And they're going to do that in order of priority, starting with, if you have it, alimony, child support. Those are going to be priority, and then everything else comes after that. And sometimes they get to the bottom of the list and they get halfway through the list and they're out of money. So they tell those people below the list, you're just out of luck, charge it off. And the rest you have to pay. So anyway. Okay. Let's see. So let's see. You can't have filed a Chapter 7 bankruptcy during the past 8 years. So you can't do it if you've already filed bankruptcy. You can't have filed a Chapter 13 bankruptcy during the past 6 years. If you tried to file a Chapter 7 or 13 bankruptcy and your case was dismissed, you have to wait at least 181 days before trying again. You may be eligible to file, but a court could dismiss your case if it determines you're trying to defraud your creditors. For example, if you take out a loan or use credit cards with the intent of then declaring bankruptcy to avoid repaying the debt. Okay, now we're getting to it, right? So, come back. This is why I said up front, you've got to try. You've got to try after you do the refinance on the student loans. You've got to try to keep up with those payments. And you need to do that for at least a year, because you have to be able to demonstrate that you made a good faith effort to repay that private debt. And if you can do it, do it. But if you can't do it, then you can file for bankruptcy and go through this very painful process and make some sacrifice. And in the end, they will discharge all of your debt and you will be in horrific shape credit-wise, but you will be debt-free. And that's what they created bankruptcy for. It was to give people a fresh start when they've bitten off more than they can chew, and they were going to be indentured to the debt for the rest of their lives. That's what they made it for. So, Hopefully that makes sense. And for more detailed information on how to execute the Endgame plan, I want to encourage you, as always, to contact us here at Turn the Tassel Consulting Group, T3CG. You can do so at turningtassel@gmail.com or by text at 484-574-1866. Either methodology is fine, and for both, you would put, or the other, you would put, I need a plan. We will sit down with you. And just like we do with your student success plans, we will craft a student debt management plan that will help you figure out how to get through this so that you can forgive your own debt and move on with your life. I'm Stephen Ampersand. This is Turn the Tassel Consulting Group, and this is the Turn the Tassel Show. See you next time.